This podcast is for educational purposes. Our guests aren't scripted and are free to speak their minds. Therefore, their views and opinions don't necessarily reflect those of BridgeBio Pharma. Also, your doctor is your best source of information about any symptoms you might be experiencing. Please consult a medical care professional about any health questions and concerns. Now, we hope you enjoy the podcast.
Welcome to On Rare, a rare disease podcast produced by BridgeBio, a biotech company that works on developing treatments for rare diseases. At On Rare, we explore what it's really like to live with a rare disease, from the diagnosis to the challenges of daily life. I'm your host, Mandy Rohrig, a member of the Patient Advocacy team, and I'm joined, as always, with my friend and colleague, David Rintell, head of Patient Advocacy. Hi, David.
Hi, Mandy. Always a pleasure to do this podcast with you. I'm really looking forward to speaking with Erin, who lives with hypochondroplasia. She has 3 sons, and 2 of them also have hypochondroplasia. So I can't wait to hear more details.
Me too. I look forward to talking with Erin. But first, we will speak with our colleague, Elena, who's going to help us better understand what hypochondroplasia is.
Elena Muslimova, the medical lead on the hypochondroplasia program at BridgeBio at QED. Elena, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, David. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for hosting me.
We're excited to have you. This is a great opportunity to learn more about hypochondroplasia. So I'm just going to ask, what is hypochondroplasia?
So hypochondroplasia is a type of a rare genetic bone disorder that causes a person to be shorter than average, with an average size trunk, but shorter arms and legs compared to the rest of their body.
And how does someone develop hypochondroplasia?
According to the literature, in majority of the cases, around 70 or 80% arise from the de novo mutation. So de novo means that they occur spontaneously and are not inherited from the parents, meaning that there is no family history of this condition and the condition occurs for the first time.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And if both parents have hypochondroplasia, what are the chances that a child will have hypochondroplasia?
If both parents have a copy of the gene, it means that each child has a 75% chance to inherit the condition. Approximately 20 or 30% of the cases, the mutation is inherited through autosomal dominant inheritance, meaning one copy of a gene is enough to cause the condition. If only one parent is affected, the probability of the child to inherit a condition is around 50%.
I see. And we're going to be hearing from Erin soon, and Erin is a mom with hypochondroplasia. So if one parent is living with hypochondroplasia, for each pregnancy, there's a 50-50 chance that the child would have hypochondroplasia.
Yeah.
And in Erin's case, as we're going to hear, she has 3 sons, 2 of whom have hypochondroplasia and 1 of whom has average height. So that makes sense.
Yes, it might happen or not happen.
How are most children with hypochondroplasia diagnosed? Is the limb length issue visible either on ultrasound or in a newborn, or what is the typical pattern of diagnosis?
That's a great question. Usually, hypochondroplasia is diagnosed later in life if we compare it with achondroplasia that might be diagnosed in utero. Usually, it happens in early childhood from the age 2 to 5, and sometimes it might even happen later in life. We heard from our community of individuals living with hypochondroplasia, as well as experienced healthcare providers. Once the doctor plot the height kind of falls from the growth charts. And that is the first time when family started to think about hypochondroplasia.
So it's generally not so evident in a newborn or on ultrasound. And in fact, it may not become evident for quite a long time as other children are getting taller and the child with hypochondroplasia is not getting taller at the same rate.
So usually that's the case. But we also should remember that some children would have more severe growth deficit. Disproportionality might be visible early in life, and there is a higher chance that they would be diagnosed. Or those children who had more severe growth deficit might have more complications or symptoms associated with the condition. And once they go to the doctor, this is when they might be diagnosed. But if the growth deficit is not that obvious, there is a probability that they will be diagnosed later in life.
Are there other health concerns that are associated with hypochondroplasia? Is it really just short stature compared to average height peers, or are there other issues?
Yeah, that's an amazing question. Individuals with hypochondroplasia may experience some neurocognitive differences, particularly with attention and learning. Additionally, some children could have epilepsy. Also, for example, if the growth deficit is more severe, then individuals might have spinal stenosis. So it's a narrowing of the spinal canal, which can lead to the compression of the spinal cord. Usually, it occurs in adulthood. Sometimes individuals might have lumbar lordosis. It's inward curve of the lower spine, which might cause pressure on muscles and ligaments and then can cause pain and discomfort. Children with hypochondroplasia might have both legs. They might have restricted joint mobility. So even though we always thought that hypochondroplasia is usually not associated with any symptoms except for short stature and disproportionality, we hear from the community more and more that it's really vary among individuals and there is no size fits all.
So it's very possible that an individual with hypochondroplasia is affected primarily by short stature, that at least some individuals, and this is important, learned from the community of families living with hypochondroplasia and healthcare providers. There are individuals that do have a variety of other health problems that are related. This is a skeletal dysplasia. There are some differences in the spinal cord and other consequences that may cause problems. Do I have that right, Elena?
Correct.
Anything else you think it's important for us to know about hypochondroplasia?
I think that the more we talk with the community and the more we learn about this condition, there will be some shift in understanding the condition in the upcoming years.
Yes, I think hypochondroplasia has kind of flown under the radar for a long time with not a high level of awareness. And I think you mentioned that some people live with hypochondroplasia most of their lives and never are told that they have hypochondroplasia, that they're just short stature. On the one hand, that's a great thing because if it hasn't changed your life very much, there's no harm in that. But as you said, as we learn more about this, we could at least make sure that people with hypochondroplasia have good medical care and are evaluated for some of the medical problems that are sometimes associated.
Absolutely agree with you, David.
This has been so interesting. You're very good at putting complex ideas into language that everyone can understand, and I love your accent. So
Thank you, David.
thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you. I'm honored to be invited for this podcast.
Erin, I'm so happy to welcome you to the On Rare podcast. Thank you so much for joining us and for taking the time to share your story with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited. I've never done a podcast before, so I'm super excited.
Happy to have you. Let's start at the beginning. And why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I'm 40. I just turned 42. I just don't even want to admit that, but I come from an average height family. I'm the oldest child. I have a sister and a brother. So it's me, then my sister, then my brother, and my parents are average height. My mom said when I was born, they didn't really notice anything. Like I looked like a typical baby. But I think when I turned like 3 months old, I started falling off the growth chart. So that's when the doctor was like, I think she has a form of dwarfism, but they didn't know because I didn't look like a person who has achondroplasia. There's Children's Memorial Hospital in Chicago that they would take me to get some kind of diagnosis. I was a totally healthy baby, like did everything on time, like walked pretty much on time. I was just short.
Yeah.
I didn't have any issues really. I had a little bowing in my shins, but I really didn't have any medical issues. I didn't have anything. So it wasn't like super concerning, like, yeah, they wanted to figure out why I wasn't growing, but I really don't think I got an actual diagnosis until I was older, probably like third grade maybe,
Oh, really?
but I was actually diagnosed, and I have paperwork that says this, with pseudoachondroplasia.
Oh,
But
interesting.
then I had another doctor that said it's either pseudo or hypo. But at the time, there was no genetic testing, like no blood work, or, they didn't have blood testing at the time. So,
Mhm.
but then when I decided to do limb lengthening, we saw a doctor here in Chicago. He said that he knows a doctor that specializes in it, which was Dr. Paley for the Paley Institute. My parents flew me to see him, and he said, no, you have hypoachondroplasia, not pseudoachondroplasia.
Interesting.
So when I had my son, my oldest son, and I knew he was going to be little, even when I was pregnant with him, because his limbs kept coming up 1 week behind, we decided to do the genetic testing on him, and they came back with hypoachondroplasia with him.
Things had changed between your birth and
Right.
his birth. Yeah. So you had your first son,
Jaden, yes.
Jaden. They diagnosed hypochondroplasia first based on ultrasound and then genetic testing.
Yes. Yeah. So I knew. He didn't even look like a little person. You would never know. Like if I didn't have it, I would have no idea. My husband's 6'1". It's so funny. We're like such height difference. But I think because of his height, my son's basically almost 5 foot.
Yeah.
For someone with dwarfism, that's pretty tall.
Erin, what is your height?
Okay, so before my surgeries, I was just under 4'2". After surgeries, I'm now 4'11 and a half, which is a huge difference. It's huge. Like just like little things, like even like I still to this day when I get in my car and my left foot is on the ground, like touching the ground is like crazy, because before it wouldn't touch the ground. I always am like, so I'm like every time I touch the ground with my foot, I'm like, I'm so appreciative. The limb lengthening, it was tough. I'm not going to say it wasn't tough.
Right.
It was hard, but I would do it again.
Imagine.
It was worth it.
So just to go back for a sec. So Jaden received a diagnosis. There were ultrasound signs and then genetic testing. And then your second son is Mason. And how did it go with him?
Same with him. His limbs kept coming up 1 week behind. He was in this like the same boat. We did see a genetics counselor, and she just gave him the diagnosis. Like he didn't need the...
Right.
He literally has the same exact
His
thing.
mom and brother already had the diagnosis of hypochondroplasia. And then your third son, Lincoln, tell us about that.
Yeah, he's average height. My long baby. I don't know. It's like I don't know what to do with him almost, because he's so he's like long and skinny.
And there were no ultrasound signs.
No, actually, he was coming up small. Like his limbs weren't coming up small, but him as a total was coming up small. So we just figured he had hypo as well. So I was like, okay, it's fine. Like they're healthy. Like it's nothing wrong with being short. They can do limb lengthening if they want to. So I wasn't super worried. His issue was my placenta was causing pressure in his umbilical cord. So he wasn't growing like he should. So they monitored me. Like she was like, if the second I see something funny, she's like, he's safer on the outside than the inside. So he was born 6 weeks early, and he was only 3 pounds, 15 ounces. But as soon as he was born, and even as small as he was, I knew he did not have hypo. I could see it in his limbs. His limbs were so long. I was like, I knew, even as tiny as he was my smallest baby. My biggest boy is going to be my smallest baby. But so he was just so long. And I was like, I told my husband, I'm like, I don't think, even though they kept telling me they think he had hypo, I'm like, I don't think he does. And I would ask the pediatrician, I'm like, do you think he has hypo? He's like, he is so proportionate, and there's no way. So he didn't even send me the genetics counselor. He's like, he does not have hypo. He's definitely like got long legs, long arms. Like you can tell the difference.
Could we go back to third grade where you finally went to a specialist? Do you recall going to?
Yes, because I remember I asked the doctor when I was going to grow, and he told me I wasn't. So like I was devastated.
Oh.
So I remember that.
Can you tell us a bit more about that?
That's when I realized that I wasn't going to be as tall as all my friends. Like I knew I was short, but I don't think it didn't like bother me, but I was like, why can't I be as tall as they are? You know, it wasn't like it stopped me from doing what they did. It's just, I was like, why am like in pictures and stuff, why am I so much shorter than, but they never cared. And I did gymnastics my whole life. It came so easy to me, probably because I was short. That was the moment when I was like, I knew I was never going to reach 5 feet. I was mad. why is my sister average height? Why is my brother average height? Why are my parents like, why am I the only one?
So it was really upsetting to you.
Yeah.
It's a reasonable question, why me? Particularly in the context of your family and your friends.
Right.
How have you come to answer that question for yourself?
Like, I think my dad would always tell me, like, he would always be like, you have 2 arms and 2 legs and a brain that works. He's like, it could be worse. Like, you can walk, like, you can do everything on your own. You don't need anybody's help, and you don't need somebody helping you. Like, yeah, you have to get a stool, but it's not the end of the world. You're going to be able to live your life and, do everything that you want to do, just maybe in a slightly different way.
So he was kind of saying that you were complete.
Oh, yeah. He was like, even when I found out about the limb lengthening, and I knew, like, as soon as I heard about it, I was like, everything in my body was like, I'm doing that. Like, I'll do whatever I have to do to do that. Cause I like knew that was like what I was supposed to do. I just knew. And I remember going to my parents about it, and I was like, I really want to do this. My mom was always like, well, we don't know like everything. We don't know if insurance will cover it and blah, blah, blah. My dad's like over here. He's like, oh, we'll figure it out. Like we'll find a way, like it'll be fine. Cause when I first like found out about it, he like researched everything and like had all the paperwork on the table for me.
So your dad's advice that you were complete, you could do everything, that there were, of course, people with problems that were more difficult to live with. You never kind of gave up on your dream to be taller either.
Right. No, it still was there. I think it was like always in the back of my brain.
Yeah. You received the diagnosis, you hear about the limb lengthening surgery. And putting that aside for a moment, you mentioned that you were always doing gymnastics. How else do you feel like your life was affected by having hypochondroplasia?
Like, I don't feel like I struggled like to do anything that like my other friends were doing. I really got lucky in like the friends department. Like, that helped so much. Like, I don't know if I didn't have them, like what it would be like, but I had an amazing family. Like, even to this day, like with my sister, like I don't go a day without texting her. We always text each other. We see each other all the time. Like, I'm very, very lucky with the family that I have, for sure. My parents are amazing. I definitely got lucky in that aspect, and they never treated me like I was different. So I never felt different at home, and my friends never treated me like I was different either. I think it was more like when I would go out and people didn't know me and they would make comments or say something, that's what bothered me, for sure.
So like what kind of comments?
Like saying the M word, the midget, or why are you so short? Or like, are your parents short? Is anybody else in your family short? Do you know why you're short? Like, all those questions. That was annoying. Like, I hated that. I was like, just like keep your comments to yourself.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's some situations in life where people feel like they're free to comment like it's a public event. What comes to my mind is pregnancy, is that if a woman is pregnant, and I don't know if Amy or Erin, you've had this experience, but people come up to you and they want to touch your belly.
It's so weird.
They ask you all of these personal questions. And it seems that height is another one. I don't know if unusually tall people get this. I think actually unusually tall people do.
I think they do.
I'm only slightly tall, and people comment on it occasionally. They certainly ask me to reach for tall objects in the grocery store,
Right.
but
I've done that.
it's intrusive, and it's clearly not the only characteristic that's important about you, Erin. I mean,
I
you're a
know.
mother, a wife, a gymnast, many other attributes, and it sounds like it was pretty hurtful. Perhaps still is.
It's like funny now, like what's going to happen. I have boys that are small. What's it going to be like for them? My oldest son, he's going to be 20 this month. I'm like, oh my God, like how do I have a 20-year-old? Like, it's so crazy. But I'm like, he's so smart. He goes to ISU. He's in the honors program there. He's so intelligent, and he's also super athletic. He did gymnastics as well. He did varsity gymnastics at his school. And then his guy friends got him to do co-ed cheerleading, and he did 2 years on varsity. He's just about almost 5 feet, and he would lift a girl, throw her in the air, catch her by her feet. Like, I'm like, here's this small little boy. Like, he's on the co-ed cheerleading team at his college too. Just, I was like worried, I was like, what is their life going to be like? I was a girl. It's easier for a girl to be small than a boy. I was like, how is their life going to be? I definitely 100% was worried when he was little. Is he going to get the same, be in the same situation that I was in, like hate being small? Like, I didn't want him to hate his life. And he actually is not like me whatsoever. He likes being who he is. He likes his body. He likes
Mhm.
being able to stand right here and do a standing back tuck. And, and he even told me, he's like, I don't want to do the limb lengthening because when I'm 50, I want to be able to do a standing back tuck and have my party tricks. So I was like, okay.
He's planning ahead, definitely. And how about Mason? Same or different? Or?
Mason is he's different. He's like what I would call like my boy's boy. He like, football, baseball, like being with his friends, and he has already expressed to me that like he would like to do the surgeries, and
Mm-hmm.
he's more like me. He is 100% me,
Yeah.
for sure. My other one, he's just himself.
Yeah.
He's just always been. I always told my oldest son, I was like, I wish I had your brain. I wish I could be like, I don't care he does not care what other people think about him. He could care less.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I wish I could have that piece of you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how old is Mason now?
Mason is 14.
Yeah.
He's a freshman in high school. So
Okay.
I feel like now he's like a social butterfly, like how I was. Like he loves hanging out with his friends.
Yeah.
It bothers him when he plays football or baseball. He's
Mm-hmm.
like, it's the kids on the other team that make comments that bother him.
Yeah.
It's not his friends. Like he has great friends. They don't even care that he's short. He's in the same situation that I was in. And that like breaks my heart a little bit because I'm like, oh, I wish I could take that from you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You mentioned actually Jaden going to ISU, and what does that stand for? Just so.
Oh, Illinois State University.
Oh, okay. And is he still going there, or is he going somewhere?
Yeah, he's a sophomore this year.
Great. You have a diverse family with regard to feet and inches, and I'm sure in other ways as well.
Mm-hmm.
But
I know.
what is family life like?
I know. So we have like a 6'1" dad.
Yeah.
And then a 4'11" mom, and then a almost 5 foot son.
Uh-huh.
My other Mason will probably be about almost 5'2". They're about almost the same size at this point. And then who knows how tall Lincoln will be? He's only 5, but I'm like, I feel like he'll either be like in between me and my husband somewhere.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, even though my husband is taller and his family's taller, my Lincoln still has, my family who's shorter. So I'm like, my brother, he's 5'9". He outgrew both my parents. So I'm like, maybe Lincoln will be about 5'9". I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we should have an office pool for his.
Right, for his height. Like, okay, like, because it's hard to say because
hard to know.
I have hypo and he doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that, like, I don't know where he's going to fall. It's going to be really interesting to see, like, where he falls in.
Yeah. Other aspects of family life that you feel have been changed for the better or otherwise by having some family members with hypochondroplasia and others without?
Oh, that's a good question. Like, I guess selfishly, I'm like, it's nice that I'm not the only one. But there is this part of me is like, I wish they were average height, of course, like for them.
Yeah.
I think for them, maybe because I have it, maybe they didn't struggle like I did because I didn't know anybody like me. No one could understand.
You were saying earlier that among your family and friends, for you and for your sons, it's not much of an issue. And then in the family, having more than one person with hypochondroplasia is actually really positive. It's something that's well known and you're not the only one.
Right. I'm hoping in a way it helped them because I feel guilty a little bit that I even tell them that I'm like, I feel so bad that you like got this from me. And they're like, no, we don't care. Like even my older son, like, I love that, I'm this way. But I explained the whole situation to them their whole life. I always thought, I'm like, why am I the only one? Like, why is it just me and not anybody else? Like, I always wished I had a sibling so I wasn't alone. So I'm like, part of me is like, maybe it was just meant to be that they have each other.
Yeah. As you were growing up, did you know anybody else with hypochondroplasia or ever get a chance to meet anyone else with hypochondroplasia?
Not when I was growing up. Started like the limb lengthening process. I met other little people, mostly with achondroplasia. Finally, as I got older, I've met a couple people now with hypochondroplasia, but it's still not that common. There's not many of us out there.
Yeah, no, it's not. How did you meet the other people with hypochondroplasia?
So through Dr. Paley's office.
Mm-hmm.
And then also through like the hypochondroplasia like Facebook group.
Mm-hmm.
So I've met like some through there. And my parents never took me to LPA meetings or anything like that. And I honestly, it wasn't because they didn't want to. I did not want to.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. I have no explanation. I feel like I probably should have.
Mm-hmm. Well, it might have been an opportunity to be in an environment where...
I know. But I was like, I think I was so like, I don't want to deal with like being little. Like I didn't want anything to do with it, that I definitely didn't want to be around other people.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of when
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
little. Now I would do it as I got older, but
Yeah.
I don't know. When I was little, I
Yeah.
think I was more like, I don't want to do that. Like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. My dad had another condition, multiple sclerosis, but was never into going to meetings. And it's interesting. Some people feel like they want to connect with other people don't. And, ironically, growing up, had you been able to feel comfortable, you might have enjoyed LPA meetings where there are a lot of people where your height was not unusual. And I think that's one of
I know.
the ways that LPA and other organizations can really help people, is that at least for some period of time during the year, you're with others who are not, towering over you. So,
No, I now as an adult, 100%.
and Chris, your husband, the dad of your boys, how is he with, Jaden and Mason? And I just remember how your dad's advice was so important to you. So,
He's like my dad. Like when I met him, he like did not care that I was shorter. He did not care that we could have children that were, possibly going to have hypo too. He was like, as long as they're like healthy like you are, who cares? Like, cuz I remember when I had my first son, she was like, after we found out he had hypo, she's like, if you want to have more children and know there's a possibility that they do IVF and like they could take the bad eggs from the good eggs, but it's not 100%. And even my husband was like, I just feel like that's like playing with fate. He's like, there's nothing wrong with you and there's nothing wrong with Jaden. Like, who cares? And he never cared, and he does not treat them any different. It was never a thing. He was like, it's not a thing. He's like, who cares? He's like, you're just shorter. He reminded me of that aspect of my dad. Like, it could be worse. Like, who cares?
if a person who's a partner reminds a person about a parent who gave them really good advice and who had a good attitude, that's a wonderful sign, I think.
Like I, explained it to him, like, if we do get married and have children, it's a 50-50 chance. It's either going to be average height like you, or they'll be, as long as they're healthy. And they were.
Yeah. Before you were with Chris and you were dating, did you have that conversation with everyone, or?
No. I've been with Chris since I was 19. And so I'm 42 now. So I've been with him like half my life.
And were you worried when you had the conversation with him that he would say, oh, I didn't realize that. Oh, that's a problem.
No, because he was always so like,
That's great.
I actually, like, funny story, when I met him, I had just done my first surgery. So I had 2 broken legs for like 9 months, and you can only sit in the house for so long. So like my other guy friend, he came over and he could pick me up and put me in the car. And Chris came and they literally went bowling, and I just was like, I'll just sit and watch you bowl, like, just to get out of the house, And after I met Chris, like, we started like hanging out, watching movies, talking, and he would come to my house and he would literally carry me, picked me up and put me in the car, made sure we could go somewhere that I could sit down. That's how we met. Like, he literally carried me. Like, I remember he's like, I want you to meet my mom, and he like carried me into his house. Like, it's so funny, like, to think about it now.
He sounds like a really lovely person. Makes me want to meet him sometime.
Probably like 6'1". He probably weighs like 280. We're like night and day on like size, but
I think he would make me just smile for being such a warm, accepting person, and I like hearing about him. So let's talk about the limb lengthening surgery. You kind of knew as soon as you found out that it was a possibility that you wanted to do it.
100%. Like 1,000%. Like when you just know something, like, I knew this was for me.
How old were you? When did they consider it to be the right age to do the surgery?
Yeah, so I didn't know the whole time I was growing up that it was even a thing, until I was 18, and I found out about it, and that's when I brought it to my parents, and I was like, I really, really want to do this. Like, I just started college. I was like, I will finish college, I promise. But I'm like, I really, really want to do this. And my dad researched everything, and I woke up and what he had researched was on the table about all of it, as much as he could find.
Wow.
And then they took me to see the doctor at Children's Memorial. The doctor there, he did like children who have one leg shorter than the other. And he was like, for what you want to do, he's like, I know a doctor that like specializes in it, like trained with the person that created it. So he sent us to Baltimore, and we flew to Baltimore, and we met Dr. Paley, and he told me, I didn't know. I was like, what if he doesn't think I'm a good candidate? He actually told me I was like a perfect candidate. Like, no, but if I meet people now, they have no idea that I have a form of dwarfism.
Now, let me just ask, was Dr. Paley the person who first gave you the diagnosis?
For sure, hypochondroplasia. Yeah, I mean, like, I did.
Oh, I see. So it was when you were 18.
I mean, it was between pseudo and hypo.
Okay. I had somehow in my mind thought you were
Yeah,
younger.
no, I was like, I definitely knew I had either pseudoachondroplasia or hypoachondroplasia. I just didn't know for sure which one at the time.
That must be the same Dr. Paley that worked with Kristen.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's how I met Kristen.
Ah,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah.
And Kristen is our connection. Yeah. So you can listen to Kristen's podcast sometime. And
Yeah, I know I have to listen. Yeah. She was my surgery buddy. We did surgery together at the same time.
oh my goodness. Oh,
And she like hobbled down to my room to come say hi.
Wow.
I know.
she is a firecracker, is she
Oh, she really,
I know. I
is.
love Kristen.
not? Wonderful person. So you're 18.
When I told my parents, I was like, I want to do this. Like, there was nothing I wanted more in my entire life, to be taller, to lengthen my limbs. And I knew it was going to be painful, and I knew it was going to basically suck, but I did not care. I was like, I will work as hard as I have to. I will, do PT every day. Like, I will do whatever it takes to get that length. And my dad was always like, we'll figure it out. Like, then my mom's like, well, we have to make sure, everything's covered. And she was the one that took the most care of me. And she was amazing. I don't know what I'd do without my mom. So they let me do it. And I'm so thankful.
Yeah. Most of us don't really know what that surgery is like. So how would you describe it?
They basically break your limbs. Well, if you're a child, they do not go through the growth plate. They make a clean break. When I did my first surgery, it was an external fixator. So they put the external fixator to hold the bone. And then once you recovered a little bit from surgery, so usually about a week later, then you start turning. So like, when you break a bone, it heals back together. So you are tricking that bone. So like you're slowly pulling that bone apart and making like a gap in between the two bones. But eventually that bone heals back together. So it's all your own bone, which is really crazy to think about that. Like, I only have one little piece of metal inside me, but other than that, like all that metal that I had that helped me lengthen is gone, and it's all my own bone. It's just crazy that even a possibility or a thing that they can do that.
I think you mentioned that you were unable to walk for 9 months. How long did is that the length of time that it took to do all the lengthening?
It took me a little over 3 months, and I got like 5.25 inches on my first surgery. So I had my surgery May. I stopped lengthening September. And then I didn't get the fixators off till February. There was no weight bearing for a month. It was almost a year before I was like walking somewhat okay. And even then, that one was rough. When I did my second limb lengthening on my femurs and I did internal, that was a little bit easier because it wasn't with the pins, and I was able to weight bear. And
yeah. And how long did the second surgery take from the beginning until
or the devices came out the following year?
Oh boy. So that's a lot of time. It's a long process. And
yeah, it's a long process.
Guessing there were times that were really painful and uncomfortable.
And then I did my arms too. That was easier because I could walk.
And both arms at the same time?
Both arms at the same time, yeah.
Oh,
so 2 broken arms at the same time. That was, I would say, roughly like 9 months to a year too by the time you're done with I mean, it could be a little less. Nowadays, things are a little bit easier because they do like internal ones now. So it's a little bit easier, I feel, than doing external. But I did external arms, external tibias, and then internal femur.
And you feel good about it now, looking back?
Yes, I would do it again.
And I'm going to ask you to say your height when you started and when you finished.
I was a little under 4'2", not quite 4'2", and now I'm 4'11 and a half. It makes a huge difference. Just little things like driving my car in the kitchen.
I think 4'11 and a half is really fine.
I'm taking my half.
Let's round up.
It's the new 5.
It's a new 5. Yeah. I said, everybody's like, why do you say 4'11 and a half? I'm like, because I'm taking my ½ inch. I'm like, I worked for that.
Absolutely, yes. So thank you for sharing with that. That sounds really painful, uncomfortable experience, but also something that you're pleased that you've done.
Yes. I feel like it's not for everybody. And like I always told myself, because I went through it and it was really hard and it was really tough, that I would never make my children do it, because like they could have done it when they were like 6. Yeah. Like I could have had them go down to Florida. We could have started it. But I was like, what if they didn't want to be there? Yeah. What am I going to make them miserable for like 3 different surgeries? I'm like, I'm not going to do that time. I'm like, I'll just wait. And when they tell me that they want to do it, because I did all my surgeries as an adult, I'm like, when they want to tell me that they want to do it, then I'm like, even as we're driving there, I'll be like, we could turn this bus around. Like, we do not need to do this. But I want them to have the want and the will to be there and do it, because it's such a life-changing thing, but it's also very hard.
Yeah, not for everyone, as you've already learned with your 2 sons. So what have we not covered, or what have I forgotten to ask about? If you think about your life as a person with hypochondroplasia, a mom with hypochondroplasia, of two sons with hypochondroplasia, and one son of average height, and one spouse of average height, what else is important to know about you?
I would say, even though things are like difficult, like I feel like because my dad like installed that in my head that like everybody has their difficulties. It's like, I'm not the only one. It's just mine's just like more noticeable. I realized how lucky I was. Like I had an awesome family, awesome friends. And now my own family that I've created is amazing. It's not everything. We can do everything that like average height people can do.
Yeah. This has been so interesting and so heartwarming to hear your story and hear about your life and advice
Thank
your
you.
dad gave you. Your husband's carrying you in to visit his mom.
I know. Back then, it just didn't seem that weird. But when I talk about it, like you never even saw me standing.
Well, and so many people are wrapped up in various physical attributes, including height, and it seems like he was much more attentive.
I know. I think about that. I'm like, he like totally like saw past like not even knowing what I looked like standing up and like saw me for me.
We all hope to be seen for whom we are, so regardless of our physical characteristic, but being seen for who you are is so important. Well, thank you so much, Erin. We really appreciate your time, your sharing your story, and it was wonderful to get to know you.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
David, what an interesting and inspiring interview. And I think it just really sheds light that physical differences may not change who we are. They do have an impact on how we think and our perceptions of ourselves. And I think Erin did a nice job of really helping us understand everyone thinks a little differently, and that's comfortable and that's okay. And her comments about her father were outstanding. I think he sounds like he's quite a gentleman and quite a person who guided her and her thinking as she matured into an adult.
Yeah. The role of her dad and how accepting he was, but also how he coached her to think of herself as a complete person. She's able to do everything she needs to do, and she has everything she needs to be an independent human being, whatever height she is. I think that advice was really, really helpful to her. And you have Chris, her husband. They were really involved with each other, and he had never even met her standing up, never really saw what height she was because she was undergoing limb lengthening. And then amongst the kids, her son Jaden, the one in college, happy with his height, doesn't want to change it. But Mason is more like Erin is, which is really wants to be taller. And Erin talks about how she was uncomfortable with her height, and when she heard about limb lengthening, she wanted to be taller, which I totally get.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to hear, even within a family, there are all of these diverse opinions and perceptions of height. I think it's good for people in communities to have options, and Erin made that very clear that those options are important to their family.
I thought it was very interesting that Erin didn't get a diagnosis until third grade, and it still was not a certain diagnosis. And she also recalls asking the doctor around then, when will I grow? And the doctor said, you won't, which I think may also have contributed to her feeling uncomfortable. So
yeah,
she said, I really got lucky in the friends department. And Erin describes how her friends and her family in general never made any big deal about her height, but it really contrasted to when she met people outside of her closed social network and how her height was something that got a lot of unwanted attention. I think people in our society, feel uncomfortable with people that are not average height.
How those physical differences can have an impact on your emotional health, your social health, and interactions with others. So it's a great conversation yet again, David. Thank you. And thanks again to Erin and Elena for helping us better understand hypochondroplasia. A big thank you to our exceptional producer, Amy Brooks. To learn more, here are just a few of the organizations that support this condition, including Little People of America, ALPA, ALPA, the Chandler Project, Growing Stronger, Little Legs, Big Heart, and the Magic Foundation. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and write us with any questions or comments at onrare@bridgebio.com. Thanks for being with us today, I look forward to you joining us again for our next conversation on Rare.